Good evening to all. I would like to take this opportunity to say thank you to each and every one of you that are present here on tonight, to the distinguished panelists for their time and expertise that you are giving so freely to this cause, to members of the clergy, we salute you on your presence here tonight, and to each organization that chose to co-sponsor this event. And to those city officials and council persons that are in attendance on tonight. And lastly, and never the least, the citizens of Troy, New York. As we stand on the close of another Black History Month, having once again celebrated the awesome and daring achievements of our people, we find ourselves caught in the terrible tirade of yesterday, reliving events that crippled not only individuals, but communities and cities, and eventually left our nation in search of a dialogue that would speak to the decency of not one race, but all races, and for the common good of all mankind, the era of the civil rights movement. This forum speaks clearly to the objectives we seek from this distinguished panel. However, now is the time that we as a people stop the procrastinating, the reopening of wounds that spewed hatred and venom and seek vengeance, and move from the plantation mentality to the table of constructive dialogue that demands us as a people to find the necessary solutions to our problems in ourselves and in our communities. In the words of the songwriter, open the gates and seize the day. Don't be afraid and don't delay. Nothing can break us, no one can make us. Give our rights away, arise and seize the day. Now is the time to seize the day. Send out the call and join the fray. Wrongs will be righted if we are united. Let us seize the day. Friends of the friendless, seize the day. Raise up the torch and light the way. Proud and defiant, we'll slay the giant. Let us seize the day. Neighbor to neighbor, father to son, one for all and all for one. Open the gates and seize the day. Don't be afraid and don't delay. Nothing can break us. No one can make us. Give our rights away. Neighbor to neighbor, father to son, one for all and all for one. Until we as a people begin to change the those and to them and we and us, and acknowledge that words and actions, even when no malice is intended, can create and contribute to institutional racism. I propose tonight that we begin to change the culture of the Troy Police Department by improving command and control, reviewing the best practices of other police departments to see what we can learn from them, promoting people of color into the command structure, reviewing complaints for the past 10 years, including findings and any discipline, improving incident reporting, improving incident reviews, reviewing code enforcement policies, understanding the workforce of the city of Troy. We need to acknowledge that the words and actions, that when people use them, we must realize that they can also hurt in so many ways. Tonight, as we meet at the table with our community leaders and those who care enough, I call on the people of the city of Troy. I call on the African American leaders of Troy, the NAACP, Troy African Pastoral Alliance, educators, saints and sinners, to beat your swords into plowshares and to unite for the people and not for personal agendas or appeasement or gain or prestige or pat on the back. It is time we move from this area and begin to find ways and solutions to make Troy a better place. Thank you. At this time, we started a little late, but we're going to move expeditiously right along the way. We want to say thank you to all of you who are here and to introduce this panel that sits over here to my left. On the far end, you see Dr. Alice Green of the Center for Law and Justice. Mr. Fred Clark of the SCLC, Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Mrs. Marie Dyson of the law firm of Robert Keach, Elmer Keach III, or the second if I'm not mistaken. And right beside her is attorney Bob Keach from the law office of Elmer Robert Keach III, PC. Mr. Ben Brucata, RPI doctoral student, and he was right here. And immediately to him, you will see Mr. Terry O'Neill of the Constantine Institute Incorporated. So we're not going to waste any time. We're going to ask the panelists, starting with Dr. Green, to please make a statement of purpose, and then we can move on. And if there's questions for Dr. Green, let's get them answered. We're fortunate to have all of them, but Dr. Green is not going to be with us too long. She has another appointment. She has to get over to the university. So we're going to allow her to go first. And if there's questions and things you need to ask and answer, please do not hesitate. Now is the time. Tonight is the time for us to begin to ask those questions and move on. Dr. Green.
Okay, thank you. Again, I apologize for not being able to stay longer, but I had a prior commitment. But you know how Pastor Willie is. He puts your name on things, and you have to be here. So I'm glad to be here because I've been here right along since this incident happened. And I'm so happy to be here because with this particular session, I'm hoping we're going to be able to talk about where do we go from here. We've done a lot of talking, and I've been really impressed with the people in Troy. They've come out and they've expressed their interest in really doing something. I thought maybe I would start out by saying I really see three things that we have to start thinking about. And one is how to resolve the Kokopelli incident. It's there, and it has to be resolved because when something like this is not resolved, it sort of festers, and you can't move to the next step. And so I just want to talk a little bit about what's being done to resolve that. And then we have to talk about how do we improve the trust and the accountability of the Troy Police Department. And that's a big job, but it can be done. I've spent a lot of time in Albany doing this kind of work, and so I have some ideas about that. We also need to do what Pastor Willie was talking about, and that is how do you change the culture of the police department, and you know, how it operates, and how it what it values, and how it relates to people. And then, of course, there's always a subculture that deals with how police relate to each other, which is another issue. But I thought I'd want to start with this whole issue of calling for an independent investigation of this incident. It's my understanding that the major players have all agreed that there needs to be an independent review, but we haven't talked about how that can happen. So I just want to throw out a few things. One is that we've already done something. The Center for Law and Justice and the Troy African American Pastoral Alliance and some others have already called for a federal investigation. And if that happens, that's fine. It's my understanding that the federal government is now asking for information from the police department, which I'm assuming they're cooperating with. And so that has to play out. That could take a while. And as you know, one of the things they want to look for is whether there's a pattern of abuse and mistreatment in the community. So that's a major issue. Also, it's my understanding that the Troy Police Department is currently doing its own investigation. Now, there are always problems with the police department doing its own investigation, as you know. And so we don't know if that's going to be realistic or not. But I think it would be a mistake to say that it can't happen. It can happen if you are in a position to make it happen in terms of an objective, thorough investigation. So it could happen, but I understand there's a lot of mistrust there, and so it might not resolve the issue at that particular level. I don't know how the, the Police Oversight Review Commission is actually going to work. It's my understanding that someone might have filed a complaint, and so the review commission can then review what the police department has done, if I'm correct. That doesn't always work because they don't really have any role to play in the investigation. We have a review board in Albany, and it does the best it can, but when you don't have subpoena powers and you don't have a way of really looking very closely at how the police went about their business, it might not get us to the point that we want to get to. So that's one thing. The other thing that could happen, and I'll depend on Mr. Keach and Terry to help me here, but it's my understanding that the district attorney really could maybe charge somebody who was involved with this incident with certain kinds of crimes. I mean, that's a possibility. And they could also do what we did in Albany at one point, and that was to have the grand jury issue its own report. Now, that's a possibility, but again, all of these alternatives come with problems. There's a political issue there, and as you know, there's a symbiotic relationship between the district attorney's office and the police department. They depend on each other. So that might not work as an alternative, but it's there. I mean, it's a possibility. There could be a special prosecutor taking a role here as well. Now, again, it comes with all kinds of political problems, and who do you get to do it is another issue. The governor actually could ask, if I'm correct, the Attorney General to carry out an investigation. That would depend very heavily upon the community's pressure that it would put on the governor to do that. But that is something that could be considered. You could also go directly to the Attorney General. They have a Civil Rights Bureau, but you have to make an application, and they look very closely at whether there's a pattern again. So that carries some problems as well. All of it, and the reason why we're looking at, you have to have an entity that has the legitimate authority and power to do something, as well as resources. So you just can't go out and do your investigation yourself. Perhaps someone could talk to the federal prosecutor in the area to see if there's something that could be done there. So those are the kinds of things that we need to be thinking about if the federal investigation thing doesn't sort of pan out. Okay, and then we have to talk about how do we keep the community organized to make sure that they work to change the police department itself in terms of the culture and how it operates. That's the second thing that I wanted to mention. And then, of course, we still, because I know a number of people have asked about the committee, the Police Oversight Review Committee that exists here in Troy. Have to look at that and evaluate whether it needs to be changed so that it can be more effective in handling the complaints of people. People really want to hold the police accountable, and they need some way to do that. And a number of communities have had developed review boards, And review boards have all kinds of characteristics, and I won't go into all of them, but none of them are the same. Some of them are more effective than others. For instance, we've been trying to get subpoena power in Albany, but that hasn't happened, okay? But it's happened in some places. But so those are the kinds of things that we need to be thinking about and talking about, and I'm sure the rest of the panel has other ideas about where we need to go.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Fred Clark. I'm president of the SCLC in Schenectady, New York, Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And I was aware of the Troy incident, and I was sitting at home, and Reverend Willie gave me a call and asked for my help in any way possible. Pardon me? Oh, okay. I had some similar experience with the Schenectady Police Department in Schenectady. So I was able to talk to Reverend Woolley about that. Some of the things, once the federal investigators hopefully will take this case on, they'll look at use of force forms for the Troy Police Department, which they probably don't have. What they do with that is they can judge their officers by the number of use of force forms that are filled out for that officer. And, you know, like if you get 20 officers and one has 10 per week, he's a problem for that force. He'll probably have to be reassigned for retraining or something like that. They also, I understand they are now getting cameras in their cars. That will greatly reduce any claims when you have cameras in your cars. And they would definitely have to answer to have an inoperable camera in their car. Some other things the feds would look at is various reports that they would have to file. What struck me very unusual when I saw the televised report on, I think it was on Channel 13, it seemed like the police chief, Tedesco, and the police union president were both attacking the Reverend. And I said, wow. I said, they should be working for solutions, a way to take care of this problem, and instead of just attacking Reverend Willie. So there definitely needs to be a change of attitude on their part. They need to work with the community. We've got a real good relationship over in Schenectady, and you know, hopefully that can be attained here, and you know, you won't see no more incidents like this that happen at the club. I understand it isn't just the club incident. There's been a pattern, and the feds will definitely be interested in that. I have phone numbers of the U.S. Attorney and the feds and the DOJ. So they would be looking for a pattern if they come in on this case. And the more complaints that Reverend gets, he's got some complaint forms. That's very important, because the feds like to work off of stuff that's written down, you know. And since this case has come up, I know he's heard a lot of other complaints from other people about different things that happened. He informed me there was a couple that night that the club incident happened that got hassled by the police. So that's another case on top of this case, plus previous cases. But I think, you know, written down complaints are the best way to tackle this program, and some sort of pathway between the Reverend and the chief, and I don't even understand why the police union was involved. And it's really going to be difficult. We still, even in Schenectady, the civilian police review board, it's hard to get them started and get subpoena power. The police don't like to give that up. You know? And when they do get a case, everything's blacked out. You know? So you can't even see. You see that in congressional things, everything's blacked out, and it's the same thing for the city. Everything is blacked out, the name and everything else. And so it's hard for the civilian police review board to really do anything unless you got a strong city council that gives them that power, I guess. You know, but it definitely has to be a better relationship, and I'm willing to work with Reverend Willie to see if we can attain that between the police department and the relative parties that are here tonight. Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Maria Dyson. I'm an associate with Bob Keach's firm. I just started working there, and as I told Pastor Willie, everyone on this panel has a lot more experience than I do. I recently graduated from the City University of New York Law School, and I just moved up to upstate New York. But I grew up in a town that was very similar to Troy, and in my town they had basically 4 quadrants, and you had upper income white individuals living in the upper quadrant, you had lower income white individuals living in 1 quadrant, and you had low income minorities living in the 4th quadrant. And then primarily police were present in that lower quadrant, and that was the quadrant that I grew up in. And I was raised by my grandmother, and when she was 16, she met my grandfather, who was 10 years older than her. And she was a young Italian woman, and my grandfather was a very dark-skinned African American, and they lived at different points in their lives in the South. So I was raised on stories about the Ku Klux Klan and the various incidents that happened to them growing up. And in fact, her firstborn son, when he was born, he died of asphyxiation, because when he was in the hospital, there were several nurses who took issue with the fact that there was a mixed male child in the 60s, and he was basically drowned by the formula that was given to him by the nurses. So I was raised on stories about the Ku Klux Klan, about racial violence that happened to my grandfather and my grandmother, and also to my father and his brothers being mixed individuals growing up in Brooklyn. And I told Pastor Willie that I would be able to speak to the incidents of police brutality that happened to my own brothers and the issues of racial violence that I saw in my community. And I also wanted to speak to some of the issues that I heard about at the community meeting that took place, I believe it was 2 weeks ago now. And I heard Chief Tedesco speak about a number of things, and I heard him say a number of things about Pastor Willie, which I don't believe is true. In the short time that I've been here and heard about the work that he's done and the incidents that I've seen in Troy, I think it's very obvious that there's a problem in Troy and that there's a racial problem in Troy, and it's a problem with the police department. And I did hear Mr. Tedesco say a couple things, and one thing I thought was a very good idea. And he said, you know, in addition to having independent review, he challenged the city to hire an attorney who's not on the city or the county payroll. And I think that that's a wonderful idea. And the second point that he raised was that in the past there has been, he says, a better community relationship with the police officers, and usually there's one officer who's responsible for that community relations. And he says that now there's less involvement with the community, and that officer who's primarily responsible for that. And he says that in his conversations with the community, most people don't even know the name of that officer. And I think that that's an important point that we need to work on, is building a better relationship with the community and with the police officer. So I think that those are 2 points that, you know, the Kokopelli's incident can really work towards having more involvement with the police department and having with the community. Thank you.
All right, my name is Attorney Bob Keach. I'm a civil rights lawyer. For many years, my office was in Amsterdam, and on Monday, it moved to Pine West Plaza over by the Crossgates Mall. I have, over the years that I've been practicing, routinely sued both the City of Troy and especially the Rensselaer County Sheriff's Department. The reason I think why Pastor Willie invited me to speak here tonight was because of my involvement in a case involving a gentleman named James Foley. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about James Foley's case. That's going to preface some of the other comments that I'm going to make. Mr. Foley was at a club in Troy that had a very similar clientele to Coco Pelli's called CD Burners. I don't think CD Burners was in operation very long, but it catered to primarily the minority community in Troy. And in the course of a party at CD Burners, a gentleman by the name of Shaquem Miller, who unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago, was being arrested by the city of Troy or by 3 officers from the city of Troy because he came out into the street and there were 3 patrol cruisers sitting in the immediate vicinity of CD Burners, and he came out and challenged those officers about being there and about basically being there to harass African Americans who were at this club. And the 3 officers, well, I'd say more fairly, 2 of the officers involved got out and just beat the stuffing out of Shaquem Miller right out in the street. I believe it was out on 4th Avenue, up by where Coco Pelli's is now. Mr. Foley's crime, if you could call it that night, was to challenge one of the Troy police officers that was beating the crap out of Shaquem Miller and saying to him, you know, why are you doing this? Why are you treating him this way? And you know, the response was then they decided that they were going to arrest and beat him up too, send him to the hospital. He ended up with a collapsed lung, and then he hired me after he was acquitted because he was charged with the standard charges you see in a police misconduct case, obstruction of governmental administration, which I call contempt of cop, being my favorite, and that was his charge, obstruction and resisting arrest. Went to trial in the Troy City Court, was acquitted, and then he hired me. And in the course of that litigation, in addition to obviously deposing the officers that were involved, I had 2 unique opportunities that I want to share and that I think are particularly relevant to what you're trying to do here. First, I had an opportunity to depose Chief Tedesco. And I'll say initially, I have a lot of respect for Chief Tedesco, his comments about the Coco Pelli's incident notwithstanding, because I believe that Chief Tedesco is trying to do right by the community and is trying to make some positive changes to a police force that has been characterized by misconduct for years. And he has met with enormous resistance from both his own police union, his own police officers, as well as his own city hall in making basic changes to the police department. And I took the liberty of bringing Chief Tedesco's deposition with me today. I'm happy to give my only copy of it to whomever may want it and can do the most good with it. But what you'll see when you read that over is that Chief Tedesco came in as the police chief, and the first thing that he did is he sat down with all his officers and he said, you know, in words or substance, there's a new sheriff in town, and we're going to start doing things differently. And we have far too many complaints from the minority community, and we have far too many complaints of excessive force, and we have far too many complaints of just rank discourtesy from you, the police officers in the city of Troy, that we're going to start doing things differently. And again, he tried to do things differently. I'm going to address that a little bit more later in my comments, except to say that obviously having Chief Tedesco's sworn testimony about these issues, I think, is something that this community can utilize to gain the cooperation of its own elected legislature in the Troy Common Council to effectuate some positive change. Now, the second thing, and even more important, that I had access to in the Foley case is, as far as I know, I'm the only attorney that's ever had the opportunity to go over and do a document review of the Troy City Police Department's internal affairs records. And I went through those records for 3 years. And what I saw in those records was both disgusting and absurd. And I'm going to detail it for you now. For years, there have been complaints from members of the community about just outright unnecessary disrespectful conduct from the Troy Police Department to anybody that even has any sort of challenging interaction with them, or even not a challenging interaction. I can't get into the particulars. I don't feel comfortable getting into the particulars of individual incidents, except to say that there were routine complaints from people who would ask police officers for assistance or make complaints about the way they were treating someone they were arresting or just the way they were conducting themselves in general. And then the response that they would receive from the police officers that you pay in this community with your tax money. And generally, those responses involve both discourteous language, oftentimes racist language, and almost universally profanity being directed at individuals who were interacting with members of the Troy Police Department. What those records also reflect is a persistent use of excessive force in the city of Troy and a number of complaints being made about that. What those records further reflect, especially about those complaints of excessive force, is that no action was taken by the Troy Police Department. First off, they would find every excuse possible to avoid having to investigate the claim. So for instance, if the person who complained about the excessive force was a criminal suspect who then may be reluctant to talk with them, oh, well, that person wouldn't be interviewed, so we'll just dismiss the claim. Not, well, we're going to look into this, and you know what, maybe this suspect won't talk to us, but there were other people present at the scene, let's go talk to them. Certainly in James Foley's situation, he got the crap beat out of him in front of about 20 people that were standing at the corner by C.D. Berner's bar. That complaint could have easily been investigated. Now, in fairness, Mr. Foley did not file such a complaint. He filed a notice of claim, which was then ignored by the city. But regardless, you know, they're easy. You know, you can investigate these claims even if initially the person complaining about it doesn't cooperate. Second, somebody would call. They try to call somebody. They couldn't get a hold of them right away. Oh, I couldn't get a hold of the person, so we'll just dismiss this complaint. But the thing that was most disturbing is that people would go into the Troy City Police Department and they would go to complain and they would talk to the desk sergeant and basically there was a policy, if you went in to complain about internal affairs problems or about police officer conduct, you had to talk to the supervisor on duty, who then would proceed to discourage the person from filing an internal affairs complaint. And I saw these records again and again and again and again and again over the course. And now that doesn't include the people who just gave up, because I'm sure that what I saw was just a small portion of those complaints. There were people that I'm sure went in, tried to complain, and gave up. Now, part of the problem with the Troy Police Department, and one of the things that Chief Tedesco raised in his deposition, is that the Troy Internal Affairs Unit is a bid job, meaning that if you're on seniority, the police officers get assigned to jobs different ways, and one way they do is they bid for their position. So at least at the time of these events with Mr. Foley's case, the Troy Police Department, you would bid to be the Internal Affairs captain. So I was shocked to learn when I looked through these records that someone who served as the Troy Internal Affairs captain during the course of this time period happened to be a gentleman by the name of Robert Paul. I think he's known as Captain Paul. I believe his first name's Robert. I sued Robert Paul about 12 years ago for strip searching a 16-year-old girl, okay? And this is the person who bid to be in charge of internal affairs in the city of Troy. So there's basically the police, what Chief Tedesco tried to do was say, I want to choose the person that's in charge of internal affairs. They're going to be separate and apart from the command structure, and we're going to utilize that office to instill professionalism to our department. Now, obviously, I don't believe, I haven't followed it that closely subsequent to the ending of Mr. Foley's case, but I don't believe he's been successful in doing that, and he's been fought tooth and nail by the mayor's office and by the Common Council and by the police union to basically just instill some basic values of respect and accountability in his own department. You also, I believe, have seen that problem with the use of the Public Safety Commissioner, who now is over Chief Tedesco. It's my opinion that person was put in that position basically to chop the legs off of Chief Tedesco's efforts to reform your police department. Now, that kind of goes hand in hand with what happened at Cocapelli's. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, Okay, both Joe Glick and Barry Glick both have come to me and asked for my assistance in the Kokopelli's case. But what happened at Kokopelli's is similar to the records that I saw looking through the Troy Police Department, looking through these internal affairs records, which is, again, a persistent pattern, not only of disrespect to the community, but especially disrespect to minorities. And what you'll see, and this is one thing that upset me with some of the news coverage of this case, because the Troy Police comes out and they make all the statements about a business, a legitimate business in the city of Troy. Now, the last time I checked, businesses aren't beating down the doors of the city of Troy to come in downtown and invest money and start a business. Well, if you go out and you challenge the Troy Police Department and you try to set the record straight about what happened in your establishment, the response is from the Troy Police Department is to make an effort to destroy you. And what you'll see in the coming days when I have an opportunity to sit down with Joe Glick, is that effort to destroy Kokopelli's will be placed front and center in front of the Troy Police Department in the form of a notice of claim. But regardless, here's what happened at Kokopelli's, and I watched the tapes that Mr. Glick has on his computer surveillance system. The Troy Police, the Troy Police were called, and everything was largely under control in that, in fact, it was totally under control in that establishment until they showed up. That's when it went downhill to be, to be a problem. And the reason it went downhill to be a problem, now I haven't had an opportunity to talk to the young gentleman that was involved, who was brutalized by the Troy Police Department. But basically, what you can see on the tape is this young man sitting over in the corner of Kokopelli's up against the wall. And the Troy Police are there, and they come in, and they're probably I'm sure they're telling people to leave, and he mouthed off to him. Okay, that's all he did. He was sitting there back against the wall. He mouths off to him, and what happens? He gets his ass kicked. Okay, he gets thrown on the ground, and then a whole bunch of officers start in on him. Then they start in on someone else, and then they complain, oh, they sprayed a fire extinguisher at us. Well, the reason the fire extinguisher was sprayed is because they were kicking the crap out of this kid, and one of the patrons was trying to stop it. And that type of treatment of the African American community in Troy is what also was repeatedly reflected in these records. So, I guess that leads you, as a lawyer, it leads me down two paths. All right. And first off, it's what do you do? What do you do, as a lawyer in response to this? Well, obviously, the first thing that I've done in my career all over the place is when I see this kind of nonsense going on, I step in, I take them over to federal court, and I sue them. But that's generally not the answer, because I can tell you they paid some money to Mr. Foley to settle his case, and nothing changed over there. And, there was an incident where they had... several years ago, they beat a gentleman to the point where he had brain damage. They went to trial over there, got an acquittal, but there was a letter sent to the Troy Police Department basically saying, your internal affairs mechanism is a joke, you're not taking it seriously, do something about it. They don't do anything about it. And then, you have situations even when their own supervisors are complaining about it. Nothing gets done. So hopefully, this Kokopelli's incident, as well as maybe people being able to pry open the lid on what's behind the curtain down there, all right? Because all the records I saw, I'm sure the DOJ is going to see them. I'm sure the DOJ is going to see Chief Tedesco's transcript. If they don't get it from the city, I'm sure they'll get it from someone that, from individuals that are trying to get them to be involved in this situation. But again, the litigation didn't have any effect. Letters to them didn't have any effect. Their own police chief didn't have any effect. What's going to have an effect? The only thing, in my opinion, that's going to have an effect, besides the Department of Justice coming in and putting a monitor in place, which I think is pretty unlikely. The only thing that's going to have an effect is going to be the citizens of this community going to their elected legislature and saying, we've had enough. You need to take appropriate action, and that appropriate action needs to be twofold. One, and this is as it was said by Dr. Green, You need to have an independent investigation about this. And I don't mean an independent investigation like go hire some Albany law firm that we've paid in the past to defend our police department. I'm talking about going down to, you know, I went to Penn State as an undergrad, okay? And so we all know what happened at Penn State with Jerry Sandusky. And what did they do? What did they do at Penn State? They went in and they hired Louis Freeh, the former Attorney General of the United States, to come in and do a thorough and objective investigation. And that's what needs to happen here. And frankly, the only way I see that happening is they're going to have to go downstate and they're going to have to get someone involved down there, you know, like a former U.S. attorney or somebody like that that's working in private practice in New York City, and have them come up here and do an independent investigation and get to the bottom of the Scopapelli's incident. Second, however, and I think what's going to be far more effective is having as Dr. Green said, having a civilian review board in this community that's got some bite. And the only way you're going to have a civilian review board in this community that's got some bite is the people that write their tax money to the city of Troy to pay their paychecks have to go up to their legislatures and they have to say, we're not paying our tax money and flushing it down the toilet on all the lawsuits that we're going to have to pay because of your conduct. We're not going to pay our tax money to these police officers, like treat us like garbage. It's time for you to take steps to reel these people in and to have accountability. Absolute power in the absence of accountability leads to absolute abuse. And that's what's going on here. And that's what happened at Cocopelli's. What happens? What happened at Cocopelli's? You know, they beat the crap out of this kid for no reason other than he mouths off. And what happens? You know, they circle the wagons. Oh, we had a riot. It was terrible. You know, I don't think they realized that there was video in that place before they made all these comments. Oh, it's a riot. It was a disorderly premises. That's not reflected in those tapes. That is not what happened, and I'm happy for anyone in the media that's interested to take a look at those tapes. They can come up there, they can see for themselves, because the tapes tell the tale. Objective proof tells the tale. So my encouragement, I don't live in Troy, but my encouragement to everyone that does, you know, we've got a packed house here this evening. Let me tell you something. You want to get attention of the Troy Common Council, have all of you show up at the public comment section and make your feelings known. Go out and support candidates, because I believe, what are they on, a 2-year or 4-year cycle here? 2 years is a short time. Support people that are, you know, you can run people out for these jobs. Their sole platform could be, we're going to hold our police department accountable and have them stop treating the minority community poorly. Now, the last element about what to do is also very simple. The people that have this experience, they need to do 2 things. One, they need to make sure that they complain. They need to make sure and complain. And people that observe this stuff need to make sure and complain. And that doesn't mean going over to the Troy Police Department and getting lip service from the sergeant and saying, you know, oh, yeah, I'm not going to give you a complaint form, or, you know, oh, here's the complaint form, fill it out for me, and then they throw it in the garbage, okay? What it means is getting a complaint form and hopefully those complaint forms are available online, mailing them in certified mail to the city of Troy so that they know that there's an investigation taken. And the second point is, for the people that are victims of these types of events, they need to obtain competent counsel to represent them in their criminal case and fight it. Because all of you're all the jurors that go down to the city court. You all come from the city of Troy, by and large. In fact, I'm sure of that. You all come from the city of Troy. I'm sure you've all gotten jury summonses, all right? And, you know, those folks need to go down there and they need to contest their charges. And it's hard to do that because a lot of times, you know, I saw in Mr. Foley's case, I believe he was at one point charged with a felony assault, assaulting a police officer because the officer that primarily kicked the crap out of him, Chris Pillay, like cut his finger. Okay, so you see that a lot. You see felony charges. I don't agree with Dr. Green. I don't think the district attorney, I don't know who the DA is now. I know Mr. Pinelli was, and I think he was sent to the bench. But what's that? Okay, I don't know that person. What's that? Oh, Arthur Frost. Glass. Arthur Glass. I don't know Mr. Glass, and so I don't want to speak negatively of Mr. Glass, but it's been my experience doing this type of work that you're not going to get a whole lot of help from the DA's office. In fact, the DA's office is going to believe the police officers, and they're going to prosecute people as hard as they can, just like they did to James Foley. You know, he had to go to trial and get acquitted on his obstruction of governmental administration charge. I think the jury was out about 15 minutes. But, you know, people need to hire competent lawyers to defend themselves, and when those cases are over, they then need to hire competent attorneys to sue their cases in federal court for false arrest, malicious prosecution, and the excessive use of force. Because there is one thing going on now that I think is going to have an effect, and what you're seeing is lawyers like me from Albany are piling on. They're looking at the city of Troy like it's an easy target because of all the crazy things that the city of Troy is doing. And that is one thing I think may have an effect, is when the city of Troy has to sit there and write out checks to all these outside lawyers to represent their police department for doing stupid stuff. All right, just doing things that make no sense at all. I know there's cases now where there's several cases involving beatdowns of RPI students. You know, when you start having to shell out all this money, public money, taxpayer money from you to defend these things, well, that may get people's attention, because then it's going to start taking away from other things. And then, you know, that's one way to do it too. But I guess I'm going to close by saying this. I appreciate Pastor Willie inviting me here today, and I hope that this Coco Pelli's incident and some of the other things that are going on is going to galvanize this community to rise up and take back its community from a police department that is abusive.
Hello, I'm Ben Brucato. I really appreciate seeing such a diverse and committed group of people in the audience tonight. I know that I've spoken with a number of you here before, and I know that you're very committed to justice in Troy, and I'm happy to join with you in demanding that. What's happening in Troy is not unique. It's not unique to this place, and it's not unique to this time. The first police-like agencies that were ever formed in the United States were formed out of slave patrols, the paddy rollers. They were joined with by vigilantes, rogue civilians who lynched people as forms of social control. So the first police agencies in this country were there to terrorize and brutalize black people, to reinforce the color line and reinforce systems of oppression that continue today through the initiations of stops, or even before the stops. The laws themselves are racist. The initiation of stops, profiling, the mechanisms of questioning, the use of force, the pressing of charges and booking, sentencing, and incarceration rates are all intensively racialized in this country. So that's where we start from. And I think that we need to recognize that. That's the system we work with. I'm not telling anybody in this room anything they didn't already know. And there's a reason why so many people don't come forward and complain and persist in fighting this. There's reasonable fear. But then there's also a belief that this is so integral to the system of justice in this country that it can't be stopped. People are demoralized by it because it's so prevalent and so persistent. But what is unique about Troy right now is that we have momentum. We have lots of eyes on this situation. We have gathered together a group of people from many different places, from many different backgrounds, who have lots of different experience and expertise to bring together and collectively work on this on multiple fronts. So in the same way that we have approached the Department of Justice for a civil rights investigation, and some people have filed civil lawsuits and so on and so forth, there's also community level action that's being done both legislatively and at the grassroots. And this multi-pronged approach is what's needed, not just now, but moving forward for quite some time. Now, I'm a partisan on the side of past, present, and all future victims of police violence. That's why I'm here. I'm one of them. I'm one on multiple occasions of a victim of police violence. The first one happened before I was even a teenager. But most of these incidents happened during a good portion of the 1990s when I traveled around the Midwest. Every time the Ku Klux Klan or the neo-Nazis came out into public to recruit and hold rallies, we were there to let them know that they were not welcome in any of our communities. And at almost every one of those, I received beatings at the hands of police officers who were defending the KKK and the neo-Nazis. And every time that this violence was initiated against the crowd by officers, there was a chant that rang out every single time. Didn't matter if it was in Pittsburgh or Indianapolis, Warren, Ohio, rural or urban, everyone knew the chant. Cops and Klan work hand in hand. And, you know, Tedesco and the police union president are offended to hear these kinds of comparisons, and I don't care. I don't care that they're offended by this. These are real and legitimate comparisons. When you see strategic, chronic use of extreme force and even deadly force, primarily against the African American community in Troy, those comparisons are warranted. Now, with regard to providing very real and material support to this community and ways to change policing, because this is what's needed. We've talked about a few of them already. But when I address the needs of supporting past, present, and future victims, there's strategic points of intervention in each one of these. So with past victims, we need to orient our work towards dropping charges against them. So on March 5th, the public comment section of the county legislature meeting, we will be going to the county legislature and to demand that each of the elected legislators call upon the DA to drop these charges. This investigation by the FBI is moving forward, and the truth is going to come out. And the county legislators need to fall on the right side of history on this one, or it will be on us, and we will make sure that they never live it down. They need to act appropriately on this, even if they are many of them rather far right-wing Republicans. It's in their own self-interest to come down on the right side of history here. But also, as Bob mentioned, providing a referral stream to competent attorneys who are specialized in excessive force claims, and we can help with that. Providing resources to make independent and informed decisions on how to handle grievances, because lawsuits are not the only way. Pursuing accountability for implicated officers. So we really need to press the DA to criminally charge some of these officers who are beating people, using deadly force against people who are minimally, if at all, resistant. Compiling resources documenting experiences of violence, both including personal accounts and data on use of force. And educating those undecided community members about the extent of the problem. With regard to present victims, we need to cultivate a culture of intervention for civilians to work to both de-escalate and stop police violence as it happens in the moment, so that we're not always responding after the fact. And in many ways, this is about fostering a culture of effective witnessing. So on the scene, be persistent. Watch, stop. If you see the cops interacting with someone, watch. If you have a cell phone camera, record. But very importantly, and this is something I'm working on right now with the city legislature, is to decriminalize the witnessing and documentation. And importantly, criminalize the police for repressing the witnessing and recording of police violence. It's a violation of First Amendment rights The Department of Justice has recognized, and I've got a whole report from them here, that it's a violation of the civil rights of anyone to be interfered with while they are observing, photographing, or video recording a stop. And I'm fairly confident that we will see in the near-term future a city ordinance in the city of Troy that criminalizes an officer for intervening with a bystander, whether they're observing or recording. In terms of ways of supporting future victims, this involves deterring police violence as much as possible. So this, as people have spoken about, includes advocating for an extraordinarily empowered civilian oversight board of some sort to handle complaints, and not only for the purposes of accountability, but to change police behaviors going forward, most importantly. And pushing for progressive use of force policies and training and de-escalation, advocating regulatory changes that criminalize violent police behaviors, promoting legislative requirements for thorough reporting of use of force incidents. So for instance, every use of force, even if there's not an arrest, even if there's not a reported injury, that it has to, a use of force incident report has to be filed, and that would go to the civilian review board for external review of each incident, not just complaints. And importantly, tying pay for performance and promotion to documented incidents of de-escalation by officers and penalizing escalation and excessive force with their pay plans and with promotion. So this is difficult stuff, especially with a very strong police union, but it can be done, and we need to push for this. No officer should ever rise through the ranks without documented evidence that they have de-escalated situations, rather than pulling out nightsticks as soon as they issue their first command. That's just, first of all, it's just not in keeping with standard police practices. It's kind of just this bad policing. But it's also something that's allowed through the way that the department is managed, and it needs to be changed. You know, documented incidents, regular incidents of use of force needs to be, there needs to be penalties in place, and they need to be refused for advancing in ranks unless they have documented evidence of de-escalation. I'll leave it there. These are all things, each one of these are things I'm pursuing to some degree, and others I'm working with many of you in the room and others to work on this, and people who want to join with us to work towards these things, please stick past afterwards and speak with me. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for your welcome. Thanks to Pastor Willie for inviting me to be here. My name is Terry O'Neill. I live in Albany. I've lived there for over 30 years now. And my involvement with law enforcement issues basically began in 1986 when the state hired me to be its expert on the federal law that Mr. Keach would know so much about. It was known when it was first enacted in 1871 as the Ku Klux Klan Act. What that did was Congress gave every person in America the right to sue a public official who has violated a federally protected right for money damages. And that violation could either be by action or inaction. And back in 1978, the US Supreme Court handed down a decision that finally opened up employers of public employees all over the nation, including cities like Troy, to lawsuits in federal courts for money damages. And that is probably one of the most important judicial decisions affecting law enforcement that's happened in our lifetime. It has had a tremendous impact on professionalizing law enforcement in this country. It's given us an argument for spending more on training, for being more selective on who gets hired to be a police officer, and certainly on the discipline that police executives have to exercise over their departments, so that their municipal employers are not going to be held liable for violations by those officers. Now, that being said, and so many great things having been accomplished through all those years, there are other things going on that have tended to undermine progress that we've made. And one of those is, I date it back about 20 years now, when Rudolph Giuliani took over as mayor of New York, and he appointed a man named Bill Bratton, whose name is in the news today, as head of the police department down there. And what Mr. Bratton did was he introduced a whole philosophy and style of police management. It's extremely technical. They call it data-driven policing. CompStat was the name they gave it in New York City. And what that does is it reduces your whole city into a lot of numbered grids where they plot what criminal activity is going on all the time, and that's what drives the allocation of police resources. Now, on its face, that looks like a very sound and intelligent way of running a police department, but we live in communities, not video games, so all of the numbers that our police agencies all over the country are waving around at us, or when the governor says we live in the safest big state in the city, in the nation, and all of this, those are factually true, but at the same time, we have constantly in municipalities all around the state eruptions like we're having here tonight in Troy. And I'm using this particular event that's galvanized everybody in your city to bookend with something I got involved in Buffalo 4 years ago that also involved something that happened in a nightclub. All right, so it's an August night in 2010. There was a big party going on in a downtown nightclub called the City Grill. And the reason for the party was there was a couple from East Buffalo, which is African-American neighborhood in Buffalo, who had the year before got married and moved out to Texas. And they had come home to get together with their family and friends and neighbors to celebrate. It's the first time they've been able to get back and do that. So the party went on until about 2 in the morning, and it got rowdy toward the end. And just like in Cocopelli's, the management made a decision to deal with the situation by closing the club and asking everyone to leave. And indeed, that's what happened. It was a summer night, so everybody just went out. They weren't waiting in line to get their coats like they were at Cocopelli's. When they got outside, there were a lot of tipsy people milling around, and somebody pulled out a gun and started shooting. And within a few seconds, 8 people had been shot, and 4 of them were lying dead, including the groom who had come back from Texas for this party. And that was shocking enough. And as you're seeing from what I'm telling you is, so far, there's no involvement of the Buffalo police. So this is not a complaint against them, but it's what happened after that night that shows the problem that concerns me so much. And that is, for the next 3 weeks, the Buffalo police were trying to find somebody who would tell them what they saw that night. And over 100 people had been milling around outside the City Grill, and they all knew the people who got shot, and they all had seen what was going on, and pretty much all of them knew who did the shooting, but nobody would talk to the police department. And the fellow who had done this, meanwhile, ran away down to North Carolina, and he finally decided to come back to Buffalo and turn himself in. Police department investigation had never solved the case, and it wouldn't have been if this hadn't happened. So I'm watching this, from here in Albany, and the message I got was the city of Buffalo has a terrible police-community relations problem because there's a shocking crime involving, neighbors and friends and family. Lots of people saw it, and yet nobody would talk to the Buffalo Police Department and get justice for the people and the families that were affected and for the community that was affected. So I like to express my opinions in writing, and I managed to get a comment on this into the Buffalo News. And very shortly thereafter, a member of the Common Council out there called me, and he told me that the city council there for quite some time had been wanting to do an organizational study of the Buffalo Police Department. They hadn't done anything like that since 1990. And there had been several mayors and several police commissioners during that time. And at the time that I got involved in this, nobody even had a copy of the study that they had done in 1990. So I managed to dig one up. And it was a very ambitious document. It ran about 350 pages. And it was done by the International Association of Chiefs of Police, which is a very well-regarded organization that headquartered down in Virginia. So I looked at that and I said, well, this is a very ambitious thing. I don't know that the Buffalo Common Council is going to be able to do something like this. I should tell you that in the midst of all of this, the councilman out there, Mickey Kearns, asked me if I would accept an appointment to this commission. And I did because I thought this being the second largest police department in the state, and this being such a terrible problem that has implications for law enforcement everywhere, it certainly would be worth my while to get involved in this learn and maybe bring some good information back to the state legislature and the governor. So I went back and forth to Buffalo during that year, and the thing is that the commission that the Common Council decided to put in charge of this, and that's what they did. They passed a resolution. They called for representatives from each of the councilman district, representative of the mayor, of the police department, of the police union, some academics, and the like. And it ended up being a commission of about 20 people. So I started going out to these meetings, and I quickly found that we had no administrative or financial support to do the work of this commission. And I was able to get a copy of the missing report because a good friend of mine happened to be the head of the International Chiefs down in Virginia, and they went and dug it out of a warehouse for me. But we simply didn't have the resources to do what the Common Council asked us to do. And among the charges, not only to look at the organization of the Buffalo Police Department and make some recommendations about how to improve things, was they wanted us to look into and make recommendations for affecting neighborhood policing, which is the term that they adopted in Buffalo. And we'll call that community policing more generally. And you've probably mostly heard of that. So my problem there was that the mayor and the police commissioner were not the least bit cooperative with this commission. And the commissioner told us that we didn't have to look into this because they already had community policing in Buffalo. And what he meant by that was the city of Buffalo is divided into 5 very large police districts with a headquarters and an operation directed in each one of them. And they have a police force of a little over 800 men and women. And what he had done was he assigned 2 police officers in each of those 5 districts to serve as Buffalo's community police program. And if you compare that to a real community police program, such as we have in Albany, we have almost 10% of the force is full-time allocated to our neighborhood engagement units. Right? Those are officers that work on, it's less than the precinct level, it's neighborhood level. And so the people in those neighborhoods know those officers. The way they work is designed very much to fit the needs and concerns of that neighborhood. And we're very happy with the result. And it's a major commitment on the part of the Albany Police Department. So you go to Buffalo and you look at what the police commissioner is trying to pass off as a community policing program, and that's just utter nonsense. And I probably am not too popular in the mayor's office there because I've been quoted saying exactly that in the Buffalo News. But this whole issue of police community relations is something that I have seen as a major problem ever since I've been involved, going back to 1986. And the first time I really got a taste of it was in 1990 when we had a major incident of civil disorder on the St. Regis Mohawk Reservation up on the Canadian border. Now the Mohawks are an independent nation, but they didn't have their own police agency, and they relied pretty much on the state police and the FBI to deal with their community problems. So when this happened, we had to inject a large force of state troopers, over 200 of them, and they were stuck there for 2 years. And during that time, the way we moved on was that I represented the governor's office at that time and went up there and spent month after month for over 2 years allowing everybody in the community to come in and tell us what they expected, what they wanted in terms of their own police agency. And as that time went through and everybody had a chance to tell us what they wanted, eventually the community came to a consensus. And to this day, the state police have not been called up to St. Regis. It's going on 30 years now. And to me, that was an opportunity to see this whole concept of community policing. It's a very powerful, effective way of dealing with a community that's in a mess, and that largely that's because people don't have a law enforcement agency that they have confidence in. Now that is what I saw in Buffalo, and that's what I'm seeing here in Troy. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to get the state to recognize and accept its responsibility to do something about this, because it never has. And there are 2 ways I'm doing that. One is I'm working on legislation that would allow, say, the Buffalo Common Council to ask the Division of Criminal Justice Services to do a study like the one that Buffalo got done for a large payment back in 1990 by the ICP. Right? There's a way they could do that, but they don't want to do it, so try to get the legislature to tell them to do it. And second is, this has to do with money. The only state money really that comes to local police departments is under what's been called Operation Impact up until now. And that money is spent, you certainly get it here in Troy. It's spent largely on acquisitions of technology and police overtime and that sort of stuff, which is all great. But the thing is, none of that money is used to encourage the kind of community policing that would deal with the real problem that you have here, the real problem they have in Buffalo, which is this disconnect between the police agency and the people it serves. So the governor is even now, negotiating a budget with the legislature. I'm trying to get my friends in the legislature to tell him that they'd like to see some of this money, it's going to be under a new name this year, spent the way people in the community want it spent to encourage the community style of policing. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to. Thank you.
Abby, you want to come up? Abby wants to make an appeal, and as she's making her way up here.
Can I ask a question also?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And then we'll ask the question.
Hi, everybody. I just want to take this moment to point out every struggle. There are some people and institutions that take greater risks than others. And I just want to pass the hat for the missing link that has provided shelter for meetings and organizing around this right now. And it costs a lot to keep the lights on and heat and provide refreshments. So I'm just going to pass the hat around. That you'll give generously to the missing link and to Pastor Willie. Thank you.
Yes. Jessica.
Yes, my question is, now, you spoke of, I'm sorry, you spoke of data gathering. One of my concerns, I believe, and perhaps some of you can correct me if I've been wrong all this time, but my understanding is that Chief Tedesco has been actually encouraging the kind of behaviors that have been going on in the city of Troy because it warrants arrests for very unnecessary things. Now, these arrests for the most petty things, because we were, during the summertime, there will be more arrests for riding the bike without a bell and a light and not having helmets. These are adults, by the way, riding their bikes on the sidewalk as opposed to in the street. This also was passed by the city council to increase arrests. Now, is this the monies that was just mentioned? These additional arrests, the data that is gathered from all the arrests that they're getting primarily in North Central, are they not submitting this data as a high crime based on arrests, not based on the facts that these are trivial arrests? Is that a fact?
Pretty much the way Operation Impact has worked all these years is DCJS, the state agency that collects statistics on crime, what they do is they look at how much crime is reported from all over the state, and they have divided us outside of New York City into 18 regions or communities, and within those 18, which account for most of the crimes that statistics that are collected, and within those they define even more closely which particular neighborhoods have the most crime, and that's where they'll give the police department money to spend in those neighborhoods. In Albany, we have 3 of them: West Hill, Arbor Hill, and the South End. I mean, everybody's known that that's where most of the crime is for as long as I've lived in Albany. You don't need a computer to tell you that. But that's where the money is getting spent, and I would assume that, I don't know the neighborhoods in Troy that well, but, well, I guess you do, but, the north side of town tends to have more crime. Is that true?
Well, what I'm saying is that there's basically the same crimes are all over the city.
Right.
But in North Central, the minor issues of the jaywalking, the bikes on the sidewalk, that's heavy duty in North Central. And what we're trying to find out is, because Troy did receive its accreditation some years ago, and they also are continuously hiring these police officers. We are at 130 police officers right now, 130 for a population of 56,000. And what we're trying to find out is, are they using these jaywalking arrests and making it appear as if we have this horrific crime wave going on, when in fact, it is not like they are portraying.
Well, since law enforcement has been driven by data for so many years, it has resulted in some terrible distortions, like what you're saying. In New York City, we had the stop and frisk thing.
They're doing it here too.
Yeah, well, I assume that that's, probably true. But what is going on, when everything that you do is based on statistics, what happened in New York was that in every precinct, every month, the precinct commander would be called in, and all the big bosses of the New York City Police Department would confront him or her and say, we see there's a spike in crime in your precinct, make it go down. All right, so in some instances you can make it go down by arresting more people for doing real crimes, but what was really going on was they were getting the message down to the cops on the street as to downgrade offenses, arrest people for misdemeanors when they could get them for a felony, or talk,
that's not happening.
Or talk victims into not complaining in the first place. That's one kind of distortion. But in other places, they'll just start trying to get their numbers up by just writing a lot of paper.
Yeah, they are getting their numbers up in North Central. That's what I'm saying, because they will arrest in North Central for the very thing they won't arrest you for in North Troy and South Troy.
Okay.
North Central you'll get arrested. The crime is jaywalking is in North Central. You will be in a world of trouble. Mm-hmm. But don't worry about it in Lansingburg, North Troy. So okay.
Yes, sir.
When President Dwight Eisenhower saying about military and industrials and so forth, what happened in the administration for President Nixon and so forth for the war on drugs and so forth, the money went to the law enforcement and so forth, and with technology and so forth and other type of tactical type of weapons and so forth, and that's where all the money is going right now and so forth. Now, in Chicago, they're using the money to stop anti-crime and so forth, Illinois and so forth, and a lot of people get killed because of that, with the money and so forth. Now, I am concerned about the brutality about police and so forth. Down in 2nd Avenue, this young lady saw her son fighting and so forth, and she called 911 in Troy and so forth, and the police pushed her through the fence and so forth, and pushed pepper spray in her eyes and so forth, and arrested her and so forth. Well, she has a lawsuit against the Troy police department and so forth. But we have to stop the culture for the police and so forth, because we have civil rights and so forth.
Amen. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I have a quick question and a quick comment. And the comment that I have is that I really hope that we can gather not just our complaints of excessive force, but also all those times that people have needed an order of protection, or people have had a psychiatric crisis in their house, or people have had an emergency, or they felt threatened, and they did not call the police. Okay? And the reason they did not call the police was their fear. I think we need to keep track of those situations, because this kind of relationship with the policing community results in all kinds of dangers, and some of those dangers are an escalation of things like domestic violence, because nobody can call the police because of the fear of excessive force. So, so if we can gather those while we gather complaints, I think that would be real important. But my question is, and for Attorney Keach, have you found evidence that they are actually looking for quotas for their police? In both Chicago and New York City, that's been an issue, that the police had quotas that they had to fill, and so they would do whatever they needed to do in order to create situations. So I just was curious if Troy is facing that.
Well, I'll begin by saying this. I won't get into the particulars. One of the favorite clients I ever represented in my legal career was Jesse who spoke on that issue. I know from my experience of people calling my office that there seems to be an inordinate amount of African Americans who are arrested for those chicken little offenses, jaywalking and the like. Like not, I think what is like not having a, I'm not sure if it's not having a light or not having a ringer. It's both. Yeah, there's a lot of that going on, and then, of course, the way they do things in the city of Troy is they don't issue appearance tickets to people. So what happens in that instance when you get charged with the, you know, not having a light on your bicycle or jaywalking is you make an obligatory trip down to, you know, the Troy Police Department there next to the city court, and you get to sit around and get fluffed and, you know, humiliated, denigrated, that type of thing. I have a case going on right now, you know, on that issue with a newspaper reporter who was charged with illegally, you know, was charged with jaywalking because he was taking pictures of a police officer who has a long history of violent conduct. You know, so I'm not sure that necessarily just plays all the time up in the area that Jesse's talking about, but I have seen that a lot. Now, I want to say a couple things, okay? You know, it's a rare day I can say this in my line of work about someone who I've sued. All right, I have a lot of respect for Chief Tedesco. I think that Chief Tedesco, he's misinformed about what happened at Coco Pelli's, and he's making some statements that aren't backed up by the video, okay? But I think he is legitimately trying to do right by the community. And that's another thing I think that can happen here is the community can embrace some of the things that he wants to do and give him support with the elected officials who have, you know, in the Troy Common Council and in the mayor's office who have made it their mission in life to just chop off his legs and keep him from being able to do anything, because I guess they're happy with, you know, the status quo of their abusive, disrespectful police department, you know, victimizing the minority community in Troy. I mean, maybe that's the type of message they're trying to send. I know that there were comments made to the owner of Coco Pelli's about, well, you shouldn't have a business that caters to, you know, to, in words or substance, to those kind of folks. So, you know, that says, you know, that those comments have been made to them both by some city officials and then also by other business owners, which, you know, is just really, you know, that's pretty offensive. But to get back to the heart of your question, I don't believe that Chief Tedesco would tolerate a racial quota system in his police department. I think that he is incapable, because of the fact that he's been rendered, or at least had some of his teeth pulled out because of these regulations. I think he's incapable of making those changes. I think he's incapable of forcing officers that are targeting African Americans, that are harassing, you know, the people on bikes and the people jaywalking, from doing those things, because he's got no, you know, you don't have an appropriate internal affairs mechanism, and his efforts to put one in place have been stymied by the political, you know, by the politicians in their community, which I think a lot of that has to do, that political problem has to do with the police unions and the sway that they hold over a lot of these officials. Okay, does that answer your question?
You have a question over here.
Yeah, just talking about quotas, like how many arrests you have to make in a week, that kind of quota. Do you have quotas destroyed? And you're saying you don't think so?
I can't speak intelligently about that. I think that someone that does a lot more criminal work in Troy may have a better handle on that. I can just tell you, I certainly don't believe there are racial quotas.
You have a question over here.
I have more or less a statement. I'm an Albany County legislator, and I think there should be more legislators and council people from Troy around here tonight and observing this. I want to thank everybody for the education you gave me tonight. I think it's really important. Community policing has worked in Albany. You're absolutely right, sir. It's a way to go. The police come to the neighborhood associations, report regularly. There is a rapport, but I urge you not to copy Albany's Police Review Board, because I've had a complaint in the Albany Police Review Board for over 5 years, racial profiling, and it's gone nowhere. So they need the power of subpoena for sure, and they need adequate funding, and they need adequate administration, or it doesn't work. It hasn't worked in Albany. It won't work here. I urge you to get a real one. and it's very important. I'd also like to say thanks for the panel, and thanks for enlightening me on the incident at the bar. I think it's outrageous that somebody got beat up while they're down. That's wrong, period.
Good evening to the panel. I have a comment and then I'll go off of that. Unfortunately, I am one that I have no.
Speak in the mic, please.
Oh, I have no respect or trust for our Troy Police Department. This is no longer my community, but I have been born and raised here for over 40 years before I went to another community. My son, unfortunately, one of 3 who is part of the wilderness, he was paroled to us, long story short. Our house was ambushed, it was bust down, and we were told that we were gonna pick up selling drugs where he left off at. Where at that time, my husband had 35 years on his job, and I had 27 on mine. I went through the channels from the top to the government, down to the citizens of Albany, and I was told that because Shaquem, who was on parole, I was suspect to sell drugs for him, being he was on parole and was unable to. So as they investigated myself, my husband, and my 21-year-old at the time, there were nothing that they could find. Unfortunately, I had rented a vehicle, and I kept it 2 months over the time allotted for me to return it. I was stopped, well, allegedly to be stopped on Halloween, and being that I didn't trust them because 2 weeks prior to that incident happened, I led a high-speed chase. I wasn't going to stop. I drove as fast as I could with my son, my godson, and my goddaughter in. And the only reason why I stopped is because my son said, "Stop, mommy, they might kill you." I was arrested, I was booked, I went to jail. They wouldn't even call my lawyer because they stopped me because I filed that complaint against them. All charges was dropped. I was allegedly to pay $3,000. I got my $3,000 back because I wasn't a convict. I wasn't a drug seller. I was Shaquem's mother. And to this day, I don't trust them. I have no respect for them. I'm just gonna keep on going, and I'm here hoping that we can get something done. It's just unfortunate. My son was the drug dealer, not his mother, not his stepfather, and not his brother. So I'm here to support you, and I will be here at every meeting as my son still tries to figure it out. I have 31 years on my job, and my husband have 42. I sell no drugs, and I'm no criminal. Amen.
Good evening. My name is Shauna Davis, and I am the sister of Corey Sheldon. I don't know if anybody knows who Corey Sheldon is. Corey Sheldon was my brother. He was 21 years old, and in 1991, Albany police killed him. He worked at Albany Medical Center as a housekeeper. He worked 3 to 11 shift that night, went home. They went to the house because they felt like he met the description of someone else. My brother was an Army veteran and was actually getting ready to go to Desert Storm, and he was murdered by the Albany police. We had hired an attorney at that time. His name is Louis Oliver. He also handled the Jesse Davis case. Louis Oliver won the Jesse Davis case, and he received so much retaliation from the community after he won that case that he basically ran scared. And our files were left in his office. My mother and father pushed the case right up to the Supreme Court of New York City, and as of today, we still have no resolve. But to still see and to continue to see, as was said, the strategic chronic abuse of the minority community is hurtful. So it's hard for me to stand here today. I didn't want to be here. I watched what happened on the news. My friend called me and I told her I had mixed feelings about attending these meetings. But at the end of the day, our community lacks what is called cultural competence. And if we can't have a police force that is there to protect the people, and there's issues in every community, I don't care what community you live in, white, black, high, low, there's issues in every community. There's people that do right, there's people that do wrong. But they're hired to do a job, and they're hired to protect the community. They're not hired to brutalize and kill our children, to kill our sons and kill our daughters. What we need to do and what we need to continue to do is speak out. We can't walk away. We can't turn our heads. I can't stay in my house. Because whenever I attend this, I have to talk about my brother. Because it's for him I advocate. So I advise, I implore that we continue. We got to continue fighting. We got to continue to stick together, but we have to be strategic. They have theirs. We need to we need to work together. We can't walk around, we can't backbite, we can't give up, we can't say, okay, that's it, it's done, nothing's gonna happen. It's not gonna look pretty. It's been almost 30 years, and it's been long before that they've been killing our people. When is it gonna stop? Or they kill people who hang out with our children. So this ain't just about blacks. If you get some Caucasian children that hang out with our kids, then they're brutalizing them too.
That's right.
They're not happy about that. So this is not a racial thing, but it's cultural competence. When do these people understand that just because I don't look like you, just because I don't come where you come from, just because I might not talk or walk or wear the same clothes you do, doesn't mean I shouldn't be treated like you. And so it's inside out. For black police officers, for minority police officers, what are they doing internally? This problem is so much bigger than what we make it out to be. And I just think that we can sit here. I hate going to meetings sometimes. I'm a union activist. That's what I do all the time. I advocate for people all day, all night. My kids always say, "You're never home." No, I'm not. But at the end of the day, let's not be talking heads. You want action? Let's do action. Let's go stand out in front of City Hall. We did that for my brother. Let's go stand out in front of the Detroit Police Department. Let's do it. It's not about Coca-Cola's happened, a young man was hurt, and that's a terrible thing. But it's so much more than that. That brought light to it. Let's get together. If we want action, let's make action. Let's not be talking heads. Let's not stay behind closed doors. Right. We need to get out there.
Can you hear me? Sorry, okay. So I think we have to keep doing that, but just like Shauna said, if your name is Shauna, you know what you're talking about, I think. But just like Shauna said, I think we need to start thinking about action and strategic action. So there's a lot already going on, right? There's a whole legal strategy, it sounds like. There's some policies that are being thought through. But as the lawyer said, we need to bring, us, black and white, together to the elected officials with what we want. And I've been saying regularly, this city is sort of priding itself on its economic development in the downtown, and I think we need to start making that be you can't do that if you don't do this, right? And we need to start strategically coming up with actions that say, the farmers market's great. Did you know there's racism going on in Troy that looks like A, B, and C? So it's got to start taking the message to the places where the city doesn't want to see it. And so I think one of the next steps that needs to come out of this meeting is calling for a strategic, calling for a strategy session to figure out we've had so many people come out, so now what are we going to do with the energy and the times now, right? So, and I'd be happy to help figure that out. I'm a community organizer. There's many of those here in this room, but happy to lend my strategic thinking to that. It sounds like we have a union activist here, so obviously, like, Shauna squared. I think it's going to be powerful. So that's all I really wanted to say. Thanks.
Thank you.
She's next.
She's next over here.
Hopefully I'll be quick, but hopefully we will continue on and it won't just go away after tonight. My son was arrested at our house 3 weeks after the Coca-Cola incident. He was at the club when it happened. And he says the only reason he got arrested, or a warrant was put out for his arrest, should I say, basically. 6 police cars showed up at my door. And I said to the police officer, does it take that many times to arrest one man? I mean, really. First, I thought that was overkill. But number 2, 3 weeks after the fact, my son's working tonight, my son's not here. That the other thing was, they came to my door without the warrant in their hand. I said, show me the warrant. They say they didn't have to bring it. Why did they have a warrant if they come to my house without it? Well, eventually they did go downtown to get it. But if you have a warrant, you should bring it with you, right? So, but the big deal is, my thing is, my son is a very peaceful young man, doesn't bother anybody, will do no harm to anyone. He was out there having a good time, and his thing is, he said, if they had came in and made an announcement to let everybody know what the problem was, it would have still been orderly, but they did not let anybody know what was going on. He said, most of the people in the club was puzzled. They were all sitting there looking, and if you see the video that he showed me, everybody was, they didn't know what was going on. So basically, his thought was, if they had gotten a DJ or got someone to the DJ to make an announcement that, you know, everybody go home, there's a problem or whatever, that it would have still been a disorderly ending of a meeting or, you know, in an event. But they made it more than it should have been. So to this day, here we are. We have a lawyer that's costing us money for something that should not be. It should have been a peaceful event because of whatever. And they pushed it out of proportion. And this is our second incident with the Troy Police Department. So they definitely need to do something. Many years ago, my oldest son, who is now a police officer, they pulled a gun on him on my lawn. He was 17 years old. He was standing on my lawn waiting to catch a bus to go to work. And because there was an incident around the corner, and when I asked them, why did you pull a gun on my son? They said because he fit the description. So here I am, a peaceful person trying to stay home and mind my own business. And how many years later, now you're attacking my second son. So I think something definitely needs to be done.